You're listening to the unofficial podcast of Patreon. Patreon Podcast. Creative people pursuing their passions.
Hi, my name is Chris Cowan, and this is Patreon Podcast, the unofficial podcast of Patreon, where you get to meet creative and inspiring people, find out how you can be a part of their project, and maybe even get a little bit of insight into your own creative journey as well. I'm super stoked to welcome Adam Bash to the show. Today's guest, Adam. Hey, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris.
Adam, you are creating a project called Sayer, and if I understand correctly, which I ought to, it's basically a podcast, a little bit comedy, a little bit horror, a little bit sci-fi. How is that accurate? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much how I have described it. How I've described it in the past. It's kind of a dark humor in space type of thing. Kind of a short run time every other week. Narrative fiction podcast set on Earth's man-made second moon of Typhon. And lately it's been a little bit heavier on the horror than the humor, but we've tried to do some arcs recently that have kind of lent more to straying towards the spooky stuff. But yeah, it's been fun so far.
Awesome. And so how many episodes are you in now?
I just recorded the 13th last night, and so I'll be editing that this week, and it'll go up on Friday. But we're a dozen in. The first dozen episodes are kind of what we consider our first full season, and we're not really taking a break between seasons, but it's just kind of to chunk it up and get a feel for the different segments of the show, more than less.
Do you feel like it's starting to go in a new direction with the 13th episode a little bit, or?
Yeah, it's kind of it definitely takes us to a place we've never been before because we go back to Earth, which is not something we've done on the show at all so far. Over the course of the last maybe 4 or 5 episodes, we tried to kind of piece together an arc where earlier in the episodes they were more kind of one-off type things. They definitely went from one to the next with an ongoing, with kind of building on the same world. But it was kind of more of a situational type thing where every episode didn't really require you to have been involved in the one before.
Gotcha.
But we kind of went on a 4 or 5 episode arc there near the end of this season that has kind of tied up all the loose ends that we needed to tie up. And so we're kind of considering training wheels off at this point and moving to the second season, just doing whatever we want to do, which is really fun.
Cool. All right. Well, before we get into the project itself, let's talk about you. Who are you? What are you all about? What beer?
No, tonight's Fat Tire.
All right. I'm okay with that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I've been doing podcasting for a handful of years. I started in, I want to say 2008, which is, I guess, veteran for nowadays. Most people haven't really been doing it quite that long. And it's always just kind of been a hobby of mine. Even when I was a kid, I always thought I would grow up and be a DJ just because I love to hear my own voice so much. And so that was kind of my inspiration to why I decided to start doing podcasting, is just because I like to listen to myself. So I figured everybody else would, and if they didn't, then at least I would get to hear myself as often as I wanted to. I really got into listening to podcasts a lot around that kind of same time. I got tired of listening to the radio. MP3s were so much easier to get access to in your vehicle. Had a long drive, the same old kind of. Everybody's got that story, I think, of why they get into podcasts. And so once I started listening for a while, it dawned on me, like it does everybody, that this is not the most difficult thing in the entire world to do.
Right.
And so I got a handful of my buddies together, and we started a podcast called Fall Damage, which was a video game podcast, and we held that on for about 3 years. Did a bunch of crazy shows, interviewed developers and stuff like that. It was great while it lasted. Nothing like getting free games to review and all that good stuff. It's kind of the dream. But and we built up a website around that and built up a community. But at a certain point, I ended up having a kid, and the time that I had for podcasting just wasn't the same anymore.
Yep.
I got a full-time job. My wife's got a full-time job, and then the hobby just kind of slipped to the wayside.
Yeah.
So when I started up Sayer, it was very deliberate in the format, because I knew how much time podcasting can take. I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to editing, so for every minute that I spent recording a podcast, I know it's 3 minutes to edit that. So if I do an hour-long podcast, it's going to take me 3 hours to edit. So Sayer's traditionally about 20 minutes, and it's every other week. So, and the way that it's formatted, it's a single voice, most of the time a single voice podcast, which works to the format in a couple of ways. One is that 20 minutes is about as long as you can listen to one person talk, I feel, but also it's sustainable, and that was been the most important thing to me, is that I wanted to be able to build something that I felt like would be sustainable for the long term for me, and I can find the time to write 2,000 words, and especially with the great staff of writers that I've got behind me, to write 2,000 words every other week, spend the time to record and edit that and send that out. It's been what's worked for my life, basically.
Right. That's cool. So obviously writing is a large part of this project, since it's a scripted drama, and you mentioned you have other writers working with you, or you act as kind of the head writer, or do you do most of the writing? How does that work?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird scenario. When I initially started, I'd wanted to bring in one more writer, because I figured I could write about an episode a month and not have really too much trouble with that. And so I kind of put my feelers out to the people that I knew, and I actually got 3 people to respond, and I'm like, okay, well, this is a good problem to have. So I just kind of asked for writing samples and tried to whittle it down, and I couldn't whittle it down because the 3 people that had submitted stuff to me were just good. There was no avoiding it. So we're like, all right, well, let's just tackle this together. And the nice thing is that when you have that kind of a setup, then the pressure's off a little bit, because you're not writing an episode every month, although we definitely are trying to task ourselves with doing that, just so we build up enough of a backlog that it's comfortable for us. Yeah. But releasing every other week, 4 writers, realistically, worst case scenario, you're tasked with writing 2,000 words every other month, which for anybody that has any writing experience is not the worst thing in the entire world. Yeah, my place in the relationship is I do act as kind of the head writer. I have my fingers in every single script that comes through there, because I'm also the one that's recording it. So I voice Sayer in the show, which is the titular character is this artificial intelligence that is communicating with residents on this tower on Typhon, right? So as the voice of that character and the head writer, it kind of makes it a convenient situation, because as I'm reading it, as I'm doing my performance of the script, if something doesn't feel right or if something doesn't work, then I have carte blanche to completely rewrite that. It doesn't come up all that often, because, like I said, our writers are very good at what they do. But usually they'll submit it to me. It's a day's worth of me just kind of reading through it and editing and seeing if there's places that we can tighten it up. And then I'll sit down and record it. And 9 times out of 10, first time through, there's really not any huge hurdles to deal with. So it just goes to surrounding yourself with the right people, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. So you mentioned, obviously, the titular character, Sayer. It sounds dirty when I say that word.
Sayer?
No, the other titular.
Oh, titular? Titular?
So you play that character, and obviously that's the character that is pretty much. Are there any other characters that you hear, or what other characters are part of?
Yeah, I mean, here and there you do. When I again, this goes back to kind of the genesis of why the show is like it is. It was created to be a single voice show, where it's something that I can just sit down and I can record myself doing, edit myself, and if something doesn't work, I'm there to change it on the fly. The most difficult thing about editing podcasts is having multiple voices talking over each other or interacting with one another, and it can be a really complicated process to edit. So that's kind of where the I guess the meat of the show is, and it's certainly where the majority of the first dozen episodes are. But we do have other voice characters in there. We've leaned heavily on some of the more creative people that we know to lend us a voice here or there. Sayer is always interacting with a resident or talking to a resident on Typhon, so occasionally things that are uncomfortable happen to that resident, and so you'll hear heartbeat speeding up, or you'll hear staggered breath, or conversations happening with other residents that you're only hearing kind of one side of that conversation of. So we do try to do as much immersion as possible to try to kind of get you into the feeling that you're in that kind of in a world that isn't our own. But we try to limit it as much as possible, because again, like I said, it's the reason that it is like it is because we want to keep it as sustainable as possible. We don't want to burn ourselves out. We don't want to get in a situation where we're looking at it 3 months down the line. And there's not time in it or there's not time in our lives for it. So that's what we're trying to, I guess, avoid.
That's always the that's for anyone who dabbles in the creative. That's always the rub, is trying to find that balance between I want to be doing something, but I don't want to overcommit or dig myself into a hole.
Yeah, and it's just tapping the brakes when you know it's a situation that you can't commit to. It's been a hard lesson to learn, because I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever I get involved in something creative, you just want to take it to the nth degree. You want to just push it as fast, as hard as you possibly can. But I'm not at a stage in my life where that's a reality anymore. It's just understanding the difference between hobby and job, or hobby and family, and it's like you said, it is very much a balance that I think everyone who is a creator of anything has to find for themselves. And I think we've lucked into finding kind of that balance right now. And I think our Patreon that we've put together is kind of supports that. It doesn't. We were very careful about how much we commit to doing through the Patreon, because I mean, we're all very busy people, and we don't want to make promises that we can't keep.
Yeah, I think, again, I've talked about it, and we've talked about it in previous episodes, just that there's that temptation. Well, I'm creating a Patreon page. People are actually giving me money. There's that temptation to overcommit to what you give them, when ultimately they're supporting you financially primarily because they like what you're doing and they want to see more and they want to see you improve. And I think keeping your focus on that and not overcommitting to the incentives is important. So Sayer is tell us about Sayer. What we've got the setting. It's this artificial moon of Earth, and then Sayer is the voice that you're hearing 95% of the time. What tell us about this character?
Okay, so Sayer is basically, he's created by this company, it's a corporation called Aerolith Dynamics, and Aerolith Dynamics owns and operates the moon of Typhon. They have a science research station effectively out there, and they do a bunch of research, create their own sustainable food, and have basically tried to push humans off of Earth in the wake of what's been a major global catastrophe. This gigantic asteroid strikes Earth and causes it's the worst thing. You never like to see it happen. It happens to the best of planets. So they they create a facility out there, lure people out with the prospect of, hey, there's it's a sustainable way of life. Good jobs, safer than Earth, because this is a tiny little moon. You're probably not going to get hit by an asteroid up here. And come to find out, obviously, everything's not exactly as it seems. It's not the utopia that it's promised. And Sayer basically acts as a voice box for the corporation. Gives alerts, introduces new residents to all the different things around the planet, kind of how to acclimate themselves to the world. He's basically a tutorial, I think, for the planet, and so it's kind of fun because you get to introduce introduce the listener to the world through a new resonance experience in the world. And so I think it plays on a lot of tropes of what you think of when you think of artificial intelligence. Traditionally speaking, when you think of like AIs in movies and in games and stuff like that, you think of this malevolent creature that was created under the best of intentions, but then somewhere along the line, things went wrong, and they decided that humans were not worth the effort. Sayer is very different. Sayer is operating perfectly to code. He just was not created with the best of intentions. So the corporation behind him is not acting in the best faith for humanity, really. So it makes for some interesting scenarios.
That's great. So you mentioned, one of your basically your approach is you're putting the listener kind of in the seat of the character that's hearing Sayer's voice, and you can hear the heartbeats, and kind of it really comes across as you listen to it. Hey, it really feels like, oh, I'm in this person's place, and hearing Sayer, and it definitely has kind of a video game kind of influence. It's like it kind of feels like a video game without the video, obviously.
Right.
It does kind of
have
one
big long cutscene.
Yeah. But it has that feel of like those FPSs where you're hearing the heavy breathing and certain more dramatic parts, heartbeat, that kind of thing. Would you say video games have influenced that in any way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Video games have been a huge influence on where we've taken this. Obviously Portal was a huge influence, just with kind of the humor of the show when it is there, is very tongue-in-cheek, and you can't, in this day and age, you can't really consider AIs without talking about GLaDOS. So that was definitely part of our inspiration. But I was kind of always a radio drama fan, and there's something about the theater of the mind that you get from that when you don't have the video there, and more about just closing your eyes and just imagining, and it can transport you in a way that I don't think that visual mediums can. It's very similar to literature in that way, where it's like it leaves so much to your mind to imagine, and so I think that it's as big of an influence on it as gaming has been. But yeah, definitely gaming is a pretty big influence.
Yeah, you mentioned radio theater. Any particular influences that stand out in that regard?
The Phantom, obviously, everybody loves that. No, I mean, just War of the Worlds I heard when I want to say in 6th grade. My 6th grade teacher was a really cool teacher, and he played us War of the Worlds, and I just remember sitting there in class with my eyes closed and just imagining myself listening to this and thinking it was legitimately real, and what that would feel like, and what that would how that would make you just kind of reimagine your place in the world, and what that all would mean to you. And that was really exciting, just to kind of think about.
Yeah, well, and that's such a great example of like that art form being used in having a major impact, and not necessarily to the best results, but
yeah. I don't think anybody believes our show's real, but I think if we do our job right, then we fool them while they're listening, at least for points, at least for parts of it. You have to be able to think. You forget, and if you can make the audience forget for just a split second, then you're doing something really right. So hopefully we've been able to do that.
I'm okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. So, what about in the podcasting world? Any particular influences, in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Night Vale was a big influence on us. You can't have a narrative fiction podcast these days and not recognize that Night Vale has something to do with that. The first time I heard Welcome to Night Vale, I was furious when I heard it. I I was like, this is so like they do it so well, but the concept was just there, waiting to be. It's like, letters from Lake Wobegon just in Twin Peaks. How did I not think of this? It was like all that was going through my head. I was like,
don't you hate that?
It was so frustrating, and then I'm like, I can't believe that. And it took me a few months because I'm like, because I did see the format they were doing and said that is so smart because it's one voice, it's sustainable, and that's what got me onto the concept of doing like kind of a single voice podcast and realizing that that is something that I could realistically fit into my day. So I mean, from a podcasting spectrum, that was a huge influence. I think where we're at now, I stopped. It's kind of weird, but I stopped listening to Night Vale as soon as we started the podcast. The day, like, we started recording on the 28th of February, and that I haven't listened to Night Vale since then because it's so flush with great concepts and great ideas that I always feel like I just could have done if I would have thought about it. But I didn't want that frustration anymore. It's like I just want to stop listening to this show so that I can create stuff and not feel like, oh, but did I hear that on Night Vale?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's finding that balance when you hear something so awesome that it's inspiring and inspires you in your own project. That's another, I think, challenge of the creative person is okay. Where's that line between inspired by and okay, am I borrowing a little too much from them?
Yeah.
And stuff?
I mean, musicians have been dealing with that since the beginning of time, though. So it's just a new
art form. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's have you ever heard of that documentary series Everything's a Remix?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I mean, that's kind of what that's all about. Is basically everything we do is influenced by that overused phrase, we stand on the shoulders of giants and see what they couldn't see, kind of thing.
Right.
Where we get our inspiration from other people, and that's great. So you went from a collaborative interview and kind of live podcast to a scripted podcast. Was there a break in there in between? I assume there was because you had a kid. You got it.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I had a kid before we stopped the podcast, but there was a little over, I want to say a little over a year break in between there. Yeah. When I just got back into listening to podcasts, because when you're doing one, you've got, I don't know if it's just me, but I have a tendency to listen to my own just to make sure that when it's all said and done, I'm listening to it in the car, and the levels were right the whole way through. There was nothing I missed.
Just admit it. It's because you're a narcissist.
I am a huge narcissist, and that's. I would rather listen to myself than anybody else. That's why I try to get on as many podcasts as possible. But I had more time to listen to more and more different podcasts. I kind of got into Real Play Dungeons and Dragons podcasts, which were telling a story kind of in a new way that I hadn't really heard before. And I got kind of into the community. There's one that I listened to a lot was one called Drunks and Dragons, and so I kind of got entrenched in the community there. One of my buddies was on the show, and so I did like some guest appearances on that, and it kind of tickled the bug again. You know how it happens, where it's like if you take any time off of anything creative, and then you go back and just kind of touch your toe back in it, it's not too long before you're ankle deep again. And so they ended up starting a site that's it's kind of a podcasting collective type thing called Geekly Inc. And so once I kind of had this idea, I knew that was the right community for it, because I had been interacting with the people that were supporting that podcast, and I knew the people, and they, everyone there is amazing. So when I originally came up with the idea, we just kind of pitched it to Geekly with the, hey, is this something that you guys might want to run on your channel? And they picked it up, and they've been kind of supporting us ever since, and have expanded to the point where, they've got, 5 or 6 big shows under their umbrella, and it's amazing what difference it makes when you're creating something to be able to work alongside other creative people. Some of the people that running some of our quote-unquote sister shows have been on our show and provided us extra voices, or provided us with, just like, can I run this past you? What's your thoughts on this? And having that community of people, not just the community, the larger scale community, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that appreciate what you're doing, but the community of creators together to be able to make sure everybody's kind of pushing at their best has been kind of a groundbreaking thing for us. And I don't think that we'd be able to have been as successful as we are right now if not for Drunks and Dragons and Cthulhu and Friends and the other shows that are on our network.
That's awesome, and that's so true. That's so important to me. I've dabbled in a number of different creative hobbies and stuff, and I've found that this whole internet thing, and let me tell you, it's great for building community around whatever it is you're doing, and it's something that I've come to enjoy like almost as much as the craft itself. Is that joining of the minds and bouncing ideas off of each other and collaborating and working together to make something that on its own might have been good, but with the input of other people, just becomes that much better.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it is just exciting other people, and if you can excite people that you really respect their creative ability, that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely, and that you guys feed off each other's excitement and inspiration. Yeah. Absolutely. So making that transition from just kind of a live interview and kind of that more free form, maybe not free form, but off the cuff, impromptu kind of style.
Yeah, it was all improv.
To now it's very scripted. I imagine you probably do multiple takes and very produced. You have audio effects and filters,
Foley work and everything. Yeah.
What has that transition been like? What are some of the biggest challenges and biggest benefits of that switch?
I gotta say, like, when you think about benefits of things like that, like when you're going off the cuff, a lot of times it can be an uncomfortable situation because when you're just saying the first thing that comes to mind, sometimes you end up putting yourself in a position that is uncomfortable. You say things that may be ignorant or insensitive or all the way to patently offensive without really thinking through the ramifications of the words that you're saying. And that's a downside of doing anything live. So that's been, I think, one of the biggest benefits is that we have a world we're crafting here that we have to be taking we have to take very tight care of how it's presented. And everything that we do and everything that we say becomes, there's a canon there. There is a world that works in a very specific way. So it's a tremendous undertaking to have to think through the ramifications of every single thing you put into a script. But the benefit of being able to do so is, you don't put your foot in your mouth, and that's been kind of nice. So there's a lot more prep involved in it. Used to be I could just kind of wing it and show up, record for an hour and a half worth of stuff, talk about games, and be done. The nice thing is that I never feel like that feeling where I had plenty of times when it was unscripted, where it's like at the end of it all you feel like you wasted an hour and a half because, like, just thinking back on it, you didn't hit any high points that you felt like you should have, and the conversation never really took off like you wanted it to. I don't have any wasted shows anymore. Every show is crafted ahead of time, and then if it doesn't feel right in the middle of it, we stop, and we have that benefit of being able to stop and re-script it and redo it and just make it better. So that's the big benefit, but knowing when to stop doing that, and knowing when to stop meddling and just finish the recording has been, I think, one of the biggest stumbling blocks. Yeah. Like anything, it's a balance. And yeah, I mean, every line I could say it a dozen times, and I wouldn't be 100% happy with the way that it was presented. But I've gotten better at getting close enough for myself, and I know I'm my own worst critic. So if it sounds good to me, or it sounds good enough to me, I'm sure most people are not going to really care too awful much about it. So
right. That's cool. So I asked you ahead of time, like, what your favorite episode is you've done so far. Now you've released a couple episodes since then, so you're allowed to change it. At the time, it was episode 6, A Dreamless Sleep. Is that still your favorite so far, or do you have another favorite now? Or
now, see, I wanted to pick like every episode I've written because that would sound right to me.
Okay, you could
I think A Dreamless Sleep is probably still. It's the reason I picked that one more than anything is that it is the most insular episode. It is an episode that you can just pluck out, listen to that one episode, and need nothing else for a frame of reference. And it takes place with a character that's not featured in, or plays a part in any other episode. And so it's the most, I feel, kind of like accessible. If you're only going to listen to one episode, listen to this one.
Okay.
And it's one that we've heard a lot from our listeners that has been exciting. Since then we've had some other really good ones. There was one episode recently, I want to say it was episode 10, where all types of crazy things happen, and that was the one where we had the most extra voice work that we've kind of ever had, and the most Foley work that we've ever had, and it was the most, I think, all-around tightest produced show. And so that one was really exciting to do too. So
we'll have links to both of those in the show notes for this podcast episode at patreonpodcast.com/Sayer, Sayer. How about this question? Is there anyone that you're not particularly fond of? That's a question you probably hate to answer.
Any episode that I'm not particularly fond of?
Yeah. What somebody else wrote.
No, any people I don't like. No, I think I'm pretty proud of every episode. I think the weakest episode that we have is probably the first, because, and that's the one that I wrote.
I'm not agreeing because I believe that. I'm agreeing because I know.
You know how podcasting works.
Yeah.
I think I was finding the voice still at that point. It was long before we really got too far into Foley work. It just does not sound as good as the rest of the episodes we've done. And since we have the script for it, since we have the ability to do so, I'm sure eventually it will get re-recorded so that it sounds like the rest of them. But when we started out, I did it all in Audacity, and it does not have the ability to make the effects that are necessary for that show to work. And so after we launched our Patreon, fairly quickly the community supported us enough that we were able to get our Audition license paid for. So switching to Audition was a huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. What is so? Yeah, you mentioned obviously you've received listener support on Patreon, and I'm sure that's been awesome. What? How would you summarize just kind of the general response you've received to this project?
It's been pretty overwhelming. We thought maybe we would get to maybe we'll get like $50 or $60 a month out of this. Like, maybe there will be people that will support us to be able to fund that, have some extra money to put towards some other things here and there, and that would be great. But it launched off like a rocket, and every time we got a new email on it, it was just like we couldn't believe it. We would, all of the writers would be in a Google Hangout together, and we would get another message that it's like someone else has pledged $15, and it's like, seriously. So right now, today we put out a new milestone. So we've seen a little bit more increase today. So right now we're sitting at about $300 a month, which is way more than we kind of ever thought we were going to get to. But we've put some pretty exciting milestones in there, and I think that's really kind of gotten people excited about it. I would say for people that are listening that are kind of doing their own Patreons, space those milestones out and always have more, because one thing that we did wrong, I think, early on is we undersold ourselves a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And we set our milestones pretty low. We had a lot of milestones when we started, but they were pretty tightly packed together, and they were all, I guess, relatively lower price points. So we nailed through all of them really fast, and then we hit a point where it was, you know, a couple of weeks where we're like, okay, well, what the heck else are we going to do? And so, you know, we had our first milestone was. Well, it's a great problem to have, but you don't want to lose that momentum. You know, if people are excited about what you're doing, you want to make sure that there's always a goal, you know, and always a goal out there that incentivizes people to try to provide you with the ability to do even more. So, I mean, our first milestone was just like we're big fans of Fiasco. I don't know if you've ever played Fiasco. It's kind of an improv game. That you kind of, it's great for playing over Hangouts and things like that, but it's something that you can kind of create a play set around any world, and it's just a role-playing game with no dice and anything like that. It's just people interacting with each other. And so our first milestone was we would create a Fiasco play set based upon our world. And so we hit that. We hit the one after that where we wanted to
the cost of your software license.
Cover the cost of the software license, and if we got that, we were going to make, I think, a Twine game. So we've got that to do. We've commissioned more music on this at this point, but we really got really excited once we hit the point where we, like I said, we got through all of these really fast, and then we were sitting there like, what's next? What's next? And one of our writers, Jonah, has in a future or in a past life, I suppose, was big into web comics, and he did a web comic with one of his brothers, and knows people in that circle. And so through some communication, we realized that there'd be this opportunity to create a digital comic on the world, and it was really kind of an exciting thing. And we were talking with his artist friend Colin Panetta, and we were really excited about it. And then we got an email back that's from Colin that basically said, all right, I love the show. I really want to be involved in this. I've just got too many things on my plate right now. So that's the bad news. The good news is that I've got a buddy, Jim Lawson, who I really would like to work with this on. So, and anybody that knows anything about comics may know Jim Lawson from the Mirage days. I mean, this is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles guy, And so that was a dream come true, just the fact that we were able to even have a conversation with him. But through working with Colin and Jim, we've been able to kind of put together this the milestone that if we're able to hit this price point for this many months, we're going to be able to fund this, and we've already started getting the first concept art from Jim, and it's outstanding. So we're really excited about that. And just today we launched our newest milestone, which is we kind of pie in the sky type thing. But like I said, you always want to try to keep something out there so it doesn't look stagnant. We've got what's called the Resident of the Month tier, and what that means is that every month we're just going to do something really special for one of our patrons, and it's just kind of a lottery thing. We'll randomly select somebody. They may get a T-shirt from us. They may get featured as an extra, to be able to voice an episode. We may name a character after them, and it just is going to go around on a month-by-month basis. And that just kind of goes back to, we want to do something really special for the patrons, but we also have to recognize the limitations of how much we can do. Like, we can't do these things for everyone. We've at this point provided no physical product because shipping, I don't know if you've ever looked at it, is insanity. So. So to be able to make sure that I mean, like you said earlier, people are putting this money forward to be able to support this show, not all the ancillary stuff around it. And so I don't want the person that's paying $20 a month to be funding us being able to provide T-shirts to everybody that's paying $1 a month. It doesn't. I don't think it's a good use of their money. I don't think it's what they're letting us use that money for. I think they're letting us use that money to create in-world stuff. So I'm kind of happy with where we're at right now with the milestones and where we're at with the listener support. Absolutely. And so it's just it's been a ride. It's been insane.
Yeah, absolutely. So your Patreon page, of course, is at patreon.com/Sayer, and you created a little video to accompany that page, which is always a good practice that Patreon recommends.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the go-to for that. For anybody that's listening that is trying to run their own Patreon and is trying to figure out how to do a video that looks good and is catchy and will drive like any sort of attention to this. If you don't have the ability to make something flashy and you don't want to like just have a talking head video explaining what your thing is about, use Adobe Voice, which is free if you have an iOS device. Just download it on your iPod or on your iPad. And Adobe Voice allows you to create these little clip art based videos that are short, sweet. They feel like an Apple commercial almost, with these catchy little tunes that they have behind them. And then you kind of have to get tricksy with it, because once you get to the end, they save them on Apple's website, and there's really no way for you, or Adobe's website, and there's really no way for you to transfer that over to Patreon. But if you just use a screen recorder, you can kind of get around that. So.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's a very nice looking video. So that's a good tip there. I like your opening line on your Patreon page. Hi, I'm Adam Bash, and I want to beg you for money.
Well, you might as well be honest with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're begging. I mean, you got to catch attention, and that's what the show's. I mean, the show is about being just, I think tongue in cheek and humorous with just as blunt force as you possibly can be. So it fits with I think the feel of our show more than anything. And definitely the people from the community that have kind of heard me in other venues and kind of know my personality, it's what they would have expected me to say anyway. So
that's great. And you've got multiple incentive levels as well on your Patreon page. Any highlights from there you wanna call out?
We tried to keep it all fairly reasonable. We only added one new one recently. We added a $15 tier because we kind of didn't have one. We had I think we underpriced ourselves a little bit, because the $2 tier, which is real low, is like a message from Sayer. Yeah. And if we were just gonna just make one script and then just put a random name at the end of it every time, that would be reasonable. But we still haven't sent those out because we've scripted everyone individually. Like, we want every single one of them to be unique. We want it to be like a trading card, where like when you've got your message from Sayer, you're emailing it to the other people that listen to Sayer, because nobody else got the message that you got, and you want to be able to share that with other people because it's canonical. So some of it is a little underpriced, but we added that $15 slot in there because once we launched the push for funding that comic, we needed people to be able to support it at a higher level, and if they're supporting at that level, then we've got like a special thank you section in the digital comic itself, which people I think are pretty excited about. So
that is really cool. Well, it's great to see that taking off and doing so well. That's definitely I like that your advice is space out your milestones a little bit in case they start taking off, because I think that speaks very, very much to the success you've seen and to how enthusiastic your audience is. And I think that's good advice. I think there's probably a balance in there again between setting realistic goals that are, not too far that they seem unattainable at the current level.
Yeah.
But at the same time, definitely I think, finding that balance in between, maybe more than $15 difference between the different.
We really didn't think we were going to get a whole ton when we started. Like, we'd never seen a successful Patreon when we launched it.
Right.
Most of the ones that we were looking at that we were trying to figure out, like other podcast ones that we had kind of seen, it was like, yeah, these guys are getting like $50 or $60. Here's kind of where they have things set out. And we really wanted to use it kind of as a way to provide just extra cool things to people that were kind of in our world. So, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely a learning experience. I would say space it out. I would also say definitely don't show them everything at once. There's no reason that you have to put if you're currently at $30 a month, there's no reason that you have to put the $150 a month one loaded on there right now. You could just put the next one or the next two, just to kind of tease them out there. But you don't have to show everything that you've come up with. Come up with all of those milestones ahead of time. But you don't have to necessarily post them until you get to where you're close enough that it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much of it is about inertia and momentum, and just maintaining, being able to keep people going, keep people excited about it. So you want to be able to keep announcing new things that are coming for it, so people are like, oh yeah, you know what, I haven't supported that yet, but I do really like the show, so maybe now's my time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's great. That's great to see. Again, that's at patreon.com/Sayer.
Yep.
So let's just take a couple moments. I just want to talk to you about just kind of your attitude, or kind of your thoughts on creativity in general. Just like when you are working on a project, at what point do you look at it and you say that was worth it? Like with maybe first with Sayer, for example, when you're working on a new episode, at what point do you feel like this was worth it, and where do you get that feeling from?
So creation is just intrinsically valuable to me. So the moment I came up with the idea, it was already worth it. I think that if I'm not creating something, I have, it's funny because a lot of people, once they're in the middle of creative mindset, they have a hard time sleeping. It consumes them. Like they're up at night and they're thinking about, oh, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. I'm the complete opposite. If I'm not making something, if I'm not doing something that has some lasting effect, then I can't sleep. I had the hardest time. I had the worst bout of insomnia I've ever had for the time that I stopped doing podcasting. It's very, just the type of person that I am. I always feel like I need to be doing something that is, semi-permanent at least. So in that way, it like I said, it is intrinsically valuable to me to just be able to create anything. Sayer, I knew was a pretty good idea when I came up with it, and then every time I would introduce it to people, even people that really didn't enjoy sci-fi or didn't really enjoy, podcasts as kind of a rule of thumb, were kind of interested in it and could connect it to an audio book or connect it to a radio play or something like that. And I think kind of the wider appeal of that was exciting to me, that I was able to reach people a little bit further spread out than the audience that I had when I was just kind of doing a video game podcast. It's a very different experience. But like I said, just the creation, just like I said earlier, just being able to work alongside other people that you respect and having them get excited about what you're doing. All of that is what I do it for. So anytime I get anybody sending me a message on Twitter or on Gtalk that tells me, I don't know what you were doing in this last episode, but it freaked me the heck out, or that was amazing, I can't believe where that went, or anything like that. Just like it definitely, that's what I do it for.
That's awesome. And see, that's a good thing to call out in terms of the difference between a live off the cuff podcast and a scripted podcast. If somebody said that same thing to you in your live podcast, it wouldn't be as nice. I don't know what you were doing in that episode, but it freaked me the heck out. You might not take that the same way.
Yeah.
I asked you ahead of time for your favorite inspirational quote. Do you happen to remember which one you gave to me? If not,
it was. I'm sure it was Tom Stoppard.
It's been a while.
I'm sure it was Tom Stoppard because I think as more than anything, the work that it is most inspirational to me is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Like, as a writer of anything, just the way that approaches characters and the art of telling a story and all of that stuff. It was fundamental in me getting excited about writing. But Tom Stoppard has a quote, and I will probably screw it up, but it's something along the lines of that words are sacred, and if you get the right words in the right order, you can nudge the world a little. Which is it's a weird Stoppard quote because usually he talks about how unimportant writing is compared to reality, and how talking about something gets a lot of accolades, but actually doing something seldom does. But it is interesting because he talks in that about the effect that you can have on people, and the fact that your highest goal as a writer is to make some sort of impact on someone somewhere, and it's not getting so caught up in being excited about yourself as much as it is getting caught up in how people react to that or what it makes them think about, and so that's probably why I picked that one.
Yeah, that's great. So if Sayer, the project, not the character, was to nudge the world in a little, in what direction would Sayer nudge the world? Put you on the spot there.
That's a good question. I think it's difficult to answer this question without giving away like too much of the core of what, because I mean there's a lot of mystery still kind of associated with our world. I was talking with a friend about some of the fundamental inspiration for Sayer, and it reminded me of there's a conversation. It was kind of a lecture, I think, by Timothy Leary, that if anybody is a fan of the band Tool, you can hear it on one of their songs on it's a live version of their song Third Eye. And it's just basically a Timothy Leary, very reverberated, it almost kind of has a Sayer feel to it, where he's talking about what it means to be alive and thinking for yourself and questioning authority and putting yourself in a state of vulnerable, exposed fearfulness, and what that means to be alive. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna get all high-minded with it and think that my podcast about a robot in space is going to change people's lives on some fundamental level. But I think there is something valuable in this point in our lives of letting ourselves be afraid of what the future could be, of what we could at any moment do to ourselves. And I think it allows us to think about, if you think about what a worse future could possibly be, it allows you to I think further identify what a better future might be. So, yeah. So hopefully that, I guess, maybe smarter people than I will figure out how to fix the world.
Awesome. Well, I'd say we're about out of time. It has been really awesome getting to know you, get to know your project, Sayer, which, of course, you can find at iamsayer.com. Where else can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at @AdamBash, or you can find Sayer on Twitter at iamsayer. You can find us at all of our shows are at Geekly Inc., so GeeklyInc, geeklyinc.com. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us pretty much anywhere. If you have a browser and you just search for Sayer, you will first find Leo Sayer, who is a musician that I'm not particularly fond of his work, and after that you will probably find us.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Adam, and thank you, listeners, as well. You can find all the show notes and all the links we've mentioned today at patreonpodcast.com/Sayer. And if you'd like to be featured on an upcoming episode, visit patreonpodcast.com and just click on the Be on the Podcast button. And, of course, if you want to find this podcast, we are all over that internet thing as well, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. All the links are at patreonpodcast.com. And this may surprise you, but Patreon Podcast is also on Patreon as well, and you can find us on patreon.com/Patreon Podcast if you would like to support this podcast as well. Until next time, keep pursuing your creative passions. I'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Enjoyed this podcast? Check out more of our entertaining and informative podcasts and videos at breakroomstudios.com.
And there we go. That, I don't know what happened with the audio there. I'm going to have to go back and fix it. Live podcast. I hate doing any editing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. That was great talking to you about your project. It's really cool. I like you're an easy interview. You like you said, you like to hear yourself talk, and that works great for interviews. I'm kidding. It didn't come across like that at all. But no, it was cool. It felt like it flowed very well. So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool, man. All right. Well, I guess I will let you go. This is gonna post on Monday, and
okay.
And so it'll be out on Monday, and I'll tweet and Facebook the heck out of it, and I'll tag you and all that fun stuff. So if you want to tell people about it, that's when it'll be up.
Sounds good. I'm exporting my side of the conversation, so I'll send you a Dropbox link with it later. If you need it, you can have it. If you don't need it, just send me a message if you don't end up using it, and then I'll just get rid of it so it's not sitting out there.
Okay, cool. You sounded great on this end, which I really appreciate, because I've had some with Google Hangout. A lot of it depends on the other person's internet and all kinds of crap, and I've had some.
We just got fiber optic installed here, so it's not Google. It's not Google Fiber, which I really wish it was, but
it's not Comcast either. And let me tell you,
exactly.
Yeah. I'm jealous, and I really appreciate it, because there weren't any glitches. This is like the first one I've done where there wasn't any major delay or stutters or people freezing. So it's awesome. So thank you.
Good deal. All right.
Cool.
Well, it was fun. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye.